Have you ever heard of the concept where a superhero or a movie character deserves an action figure? I.e., you've earned this. You deserve this. You are worthy of being an action figure. What does that actually mean? We talk about that all the time. And I think there are some answers to this. It's an interesting, point of view when it comes to collecting action figures. For starters, I think that when a company starts a toy line, it has a bit of an obligation to finish it, if you will. In other words, it's kind of the deal that collectors make with toy companies. That if a collector is going to purchase a figure line from a company, the company has an obligation to fill that collector's shelf. If a collector is going to dedicate a shelf, limited display space they may have, to a figure line, does the company sort of have an obligation to fill that shelf? And exactly who do they fill it with? Are they obligated to fill it with only the A-list characters, or are they allowed to do really obscure characters from, a certain series, a villain or a sidekick or, someone with very limited screen time? I use White Rabbit here as an example because when she was announced for the Marvel Legend line, a lot of people even said, like, who the heck is this? This is a Spider-Man villain? I don't recognize her. And she's obviously a legitimate Spider-Man villain. This is her first appearance. She has also appeared in modern times, and she's actually a really cool figure. I bought this figure, and I've enjoyed having her on my Spider-Man villain shelf. Can I say that she's ever been on my request list? No, I never once thought about it, but when I saw her, I was like, hey, that's a cool figure. Plus, I also like Alice in Wonderland, so it's kind of got that cool, Lewis Carroll vibe. All right, I'm a little off track. Let's get back on track. So, finishing a line, what does that mean? Well, some lines, like the vintage Star Wars line, had your 92 carded figures, plus give or take a few others, like the Max Rebo Band, to make your 96. And there are a few figures that the modern line, started in 1995 by Hasbro as Power of the Force 2, still have not offered. And I think one of the most prominent ones is this guy. I think Slim Alu is his proper Star Warsian name. He is one of the Imperial dignitaries that here's a shot of them from the movie. There's a bunch of them. Basically these guys with these kind of Oompa Loompa hats that come out of the Imperial shuttle with the Emperor and are sort of in the background nodding away at him during Return of the Jedi. And Hasbro did make two Imperial dignitaries. They actually made two fantastic Imperial dignitaries. I actually remember I bought them on my birthday, the year they came out, because I was in the aisle and another collector had them, and I asked if I could have one, and I showed him my ID that it was actually my birthday, and he was nice enough to let me have one of them. I'll always remember that. It's nice when collectors do things for other collectors. But this guy, this particular Imperial dignitary, has not been made. Doing those other two for collectors does not count. It's just an additional character. It doesn't take the place of this one. Another good example with that whole Star Wars completing the 92 or 96 would be your mustached Bespin security guard. So also one of the figures that was in the vintage line and has not gotten a modern release. Now it's interesting, the figure on the card back doesn't quite match the figure on the card. The figure on the card back has a full beard. So to redo this figure, to modernize him, do we want the fully bearded version as shown on the card back? Or do we want the version with the mustache that we got actually as an action figure? And if we do want the figure with the mustache, how do we want that mustache? Do we want it with handlebars? Do we want it not with handlebars? It becomes an absolute headache trying to figure out when you're updating a figure from the vintage line, especially a line like Star Wars, who do you do? I mean, this is probably the character that the figure was actually based off of, but not the one on the card back. Pardon me that I don't know his Star Warsian name. I'm sure he has one and a full backstory and about 10, existing legend novels about him. Is this what the figure would look like if it was released today? Would it be of this guy, or would it again be the full bearded character? These are the questions that fans debate all the time, but it still circles around the idea of updating the original figure line and having a sense of completion. Now, another good example is the Gonk Droid. Personally, one of my absolute favorite Star Wars characters. I think a lot of people like the Gonk Droid because, it's a square box with legs that sings and dances and does, talent routines. I'm just kidding. He basically just sits there. Now, Hasbro recently, a few months ago, it's, what are we, in June 2020 right now, so a few months back, they did reveal this figure as the official update of the vintage Gonk Droid character. And a lot of fans were like, well, wait a minute, that doesn't look like the vintage Gonk figure. And admittedly, there are quite a lot of different versions of, if you will, the Gonk Droid out there that have appeared in films. The original one, you'll notice, again, doesn't match the card art. You get kind of this more squarish, less rectangularly blue guy, and on the card is the Gonk, this one, from the Jawa Sandcrawler, which does not really match the toy. Now, some people have thought, oh, this is just another case of, the figure not matching the reference material like some of those Cantina aliens, and I'll get to that actually in just a moment. But it turns out this figure is in the movie. It's the Lars family Gonk Droid, which can be seen briefly over Luke's shoulder in like one shot in the movie. There's kind of a close-up. It's a little blurry. But yeah, I mean, this is actually the figure that Hasbro is doing in the upcoming vintage figure, announced a few months ago. And, looking at another image like this still from the, behind the scenes, you can see that, yes, it does have kind of those weird little bulby things on top, and this indeed is, if you will, the figure that the vintage figure was based on, even though the vintage figure doesn't have those weird bulby things on top, which I think threw a lot of fans off. And again, so that now begs the question, to finish the vintage line, does this figure solidify or, if you will, satisfy collectors' needs to have a update of the original Power Droid or Gonk Droid from the vintage Kenner line? This figure is absolutely movie accurate to what that figure was based on, but it also kind of doesn't look like the vintage figure. The vintage figure was a little bluer, a little boxier, more square, and didn't have all those doodads on the top. But again, now this brings up the point, do you need to update the figures based on sort of the 80s Kenner interpretation of Star Wars reference material? So that Lars family Gonk Droid became that. Ponda Baba, or Walrus Man, if you will, was issued in the same, series. I mean, ish, if you will. I think like the 79 figures, the 80 figures for A New Hope. He also, doesn't look like his reference material. You can see right there on the card back that he's wearing a orange jacket, not a blue jumpsuit with an orange, like, sleeveless sort of sweatshirt kind of thingy on him. So is doing, a Walrus Man figure required to have a modern update? Or are we satisfied with the fact that we've gotten Ponda Baba with an orange jacket that actually looks like he did in the movie? And of course, we've gotten this figure several times. I think this was the first modern release in Power of the Force 2, but, we've since then gotten quite a few other versions of him. Switching gears to superpowers. So this was one that was fully updated, and I'm saying that, I know I'm patting myself on the back because I was the brand manager for DCU Classics, but I bring this up because it was absolutely deliberate. As a collector myself, I understood the emotional connection of feeling a sense of accomplishment when you get all the figures from a vintage line in a modern line. And that's why when we did the DCU Classics line at Mattel, we absolutely made a deliberate attempt, and I think succeeded, in doing every Superpowers figure in DC Universe Classics in roughly the same deco, the same look. Even figures that were unreleased in Superpowers but planned were included. And this creates not only a sense of accomplishment, but it's a sense of relief, because you feel like, yes, I have, quote-unquote, collected them all. That feeling, that call to action of the collect them all, That's why we do this. So when a line like Thundercats Classics comes out, and I know Super 7 has picked it up again, and it looks like hopefully they're going to finish it, for those of us who have dedicated a shelf to it, not having a complete line is like, a bullet through the heart. Don't want to be too dramatic here, but it's painful. And what about a figure like Starburst She-Ra, if you will, that we didn't get to in Masters of the Universe Classics? Is that the same as not finishing off the main characters in Thundercats or the original 92 in Star Wars? Or what about New Adventures KO, another character that we did not get to in Masters of the Universe Classics? Does that have the same effect as not having the exact Gonk Droid or the mustached guard or all of the Thundercats team? There's no easy answer to that. But the bottom line is there is kind of an unspoken agreement between Toy Company and Toy Collector of completing a line or at least filling up that shelf. If we're going to dedicate a shelf space to a line, we feel like we should get a full shelf worth, not just one or two characters, or to be missing a key character. For me personally, with Marvel Legends, I collect Spider-Man villains. I am dying to get Spot. I've even heard rumors that he's been sculpted and is just kind of waiting in the wings. But, is Spot more deserving of a figure in Marvel Legends than, say, Electro, a classic version of Electro? As much as I love Spot, and, Electro is kind of okay with me, I would say no. I'd say Electro is more important. He is more well-known. He's more famous. So I would say he deserves a figure more than, say, Spot. I'll still take my Spot figure, Hasbro, if you're listening. I really want him. All right, so kind of in conclusion, yeah, it all comes down to emotion versus money. A toy company obviously has to turn a profit and it has to answer to stockholders. But we are emotionally invested in this product. And having an incomplete line, a line that is missing figures that deserve to have a figure, or characters that deserve to have a figure, is always kind of an open wound. So when you start a toy line, having a plan to finish it is just as important when reaching collectors as that very first figure. That last figure and that first figure are bookends to creating a complete collection and capturing the hearts of collectors. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If there are issues related to it I haven't covered, leave them in the comments below and I'll try to get back to you. If you like the video and the channel, subscribe, thumbs up, and see you guys in the toy aisle.